Okay, Creed 2, aka Rocky 4, meets the next generation, and I enjoyed this movie. It actually fixed a big issue that I had with the first movie that I thought about it when I was rewatching it right before this, because in this particular movie, I felt just as interested in the fight scenes that I was in the non fighting stuff. This film got the right balance between the two, unlike the first one, though that's not to say in this franchise you can have less emphasis on the fighting stuff and it still turns out to be really good. The first Rocky movie and the sixth one both did that and it worked there. Right. I do, however, have one big issue with this movie which I hope to correctly convey to all of you, even though I'm sure a lot of you are going to disagree with me, and I'll tell you right now, you are very much justified in disagreeing with me. But what did I like in more detail? Well, the fighting, I was a lot more emotionally invested, and I did have a few flashbacks to my first watching of Rocky 4, and just, how brutal the beat-ups were, like how the hits that Donnie got, just, oh man, those were some really tough hits. But I also like how they tried to add, seeing how Donnie views himself on like the business side of things with his trainer or like manager guy. They never really made it clear exactly who the guy is, and I wish that they had fleshed out the character a tiny bit more, but it was nice to see that other aspect. And then how they're handling his relationship with Bianca, and then stress about both of them becoming parents, even though they're financially set. Those were nice bits. And I never thought to think about the possibility that because Bianca has progressive hearing loss, that potentially their child could be born deaf or born severely limited in terms of hearing. That never occurred to me. So that was a nice little bit to add with the movie and all that jazz. And then little bits with Rocky that were done here. I liked most of it, but the issue that I've got with his story arc sort of ties into the big overall thing that I have a problem with in this movie, so I'm going to avoid that. But I do like how they made Rocky a tiny bit of a complainer at the beginning, because, yeah, what is Donnie's full reasoning for doing this particular fight? It's a complicated issue, very complicated. And you shouldn't want to fight someone for revenge. Sure, Rocky himself did that, but, well, he didn't know Apollo, so there's that added layer. Right. And then the training for this movie, sure, it doesn't have a as great of a score in the background, but oh man, the rawness that you felt, and then you see how much Michael B is able to step into his character and be really going at it when he really only did a fraction of what you're seeing on screen, even though he has to try doing it for multiple takes. Just, man, dude. I really like that unique setting. That was pretty creative. Anything else to mention? Well, yeah, the menace and the different types of menace that you got from Dolph and then Victor in the movie, yeah, they did good. And the ending of the final fight between Donnie and Victor, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the first time in the entire Rocky franchise that a fight has been called because a trainer threw in the towel. Sure, Rocky probably would have thrown in the towel, but Draco got that last punch on Apollo before he could do it, and even then, the way the towel falls to the ground, that's not him throwing the towel, that's him dropping the towel in amazement. And then the referees called the fight with Hulk Hogan after the first round was over, so that's different. Here, we've got Drago throwing in the towel, but I don't totally get why he did it, because from my perspective, while Donnie was pummeling Victor very well and had knocked it down twice, you kind of got the idea that once that burst of energy that Donnie was experiencing stopped, that he was on his last legs. Well, Victor was more or less on his last legs because of how much Donnie was hitting him. So, my perspective was, whoever falls down to the ground next is not getting up this time. This is it. Now, granted, odds were Donnie would have been able to knock down Victor with that surge of energy he was experiencing, but there was a somewhat decent chance that the energy would have worn out, I think like 20%, so I'm really curious as it was as to why Ivan Drago decided to throw in the towel there, because there was a decent chance the energy might have worn out. Now, on the special features here, Dolph argues that the character does it because he's worried that his son is literally going to get killed out there, but I really wonder how he got that idea, and since there's no, like, a director's commentary for this movie, I don't think there's that much that we can look up as to ascertain what the filmmakers were thinking when they did that scene. Plus, if you look at the locker room deleted scene that's on this Blu-ray, and all the non-verbal exchanges that occur between Donnie, Victor, Draco, and Stallone, Donnie would not have done anything beyond reason to Victor, because Victor isn't the person that he has an issue with. It's Drago himself that has the real issue, that he really has the issue with. Victor, in many ways, was a pawn. Although he does have the ability to stand up to his father, like those exchanges that you saw with him when, I'm guessing, Drago's wife on the fourth movie returns, because they don't explicitly state that that was the same character, though really, who else could it be? The emotion that he was feeling, though, yeah, that was real, so there's a heart to Victor. There was just problems, I guess. Yeah. And even then, at the end of the movie, neither Draco or Victor point the fingers at each other. They just continue doing something that's very similar to how it was at the beginning of the movie, suggesting that if there's any problems that they've got, they'll work them out. So, that was nice. Alright, so time to talk about the main issue that I've got with this movie, which is all one big thing with a few minor things interlaced with it. It's that I feel like that this movie has a decent amount of continuity errors with the Rocky film series, because I have a really tough time believing that the Draco that we're seeing in this movie is the same Draco that was in the fourth movie. I mean, like, 30 years can do a lot to a person's personality, but just given how emotionally dead Draco was in Rocky IV compared to here, where you see that he's perfectly capable of formulating and expressing emotions, he just chooses not to a decent amount of the time, I just don't feel like it lines up, honestly. And Stallone's Rocky's relationship with his son in the movie, just, I don't really get how the two of them could have, broken off contact after what happened in the sixth movie. Granted, the only thing that was explicitly stated as being fixed in the sixth movie was Robert's faith in Rocky doing the fight, and possibly accepting some of his father's inspirational speech that they have outside of the restaurant, but I don't know. It just seems like a bit of a stretch that the two of them would just have another strain on their relationship, even though time seemed to heal it just fine, and it wasn't as bad as what was going on at the beginning of the sixth movie, based on what little I've learned. But I'm really starting to think that these two movies can't really take place in the exact same timeline that the original Rocky film series took place in. It's kind of like all the Land Before Time movies minus the first one. There's just no way that the first movie could take place in the same continuity that everything else takes place in. Something very close to the first movie did happen, but not as we actually saw it, and even then, in this case, if you were to simply ignore the sixth movie, that actually solves most of the problems, except for Draco, because if you look at the interior of Rocky's restaurant, it's totally different. And the fact that Robert is also played by the same actor in this movie that he was in Rocky Balboa, that makes it a little easier to argue that maybe, this is a slightly different timeline. But as I alluded to earlier, I think most of you are going to disagree with me on this, and you're perfectly justified in doing so, okay? Because even I think that I'm stretching it. I'm just having a tough time believing it, honestly. But that's my main issue with the movie. Other than that, I really enjoyed the product that they turned out, and I'm looking forward to seeing the third movie. 4 out of 5 easily, maybe even 4.5 on the critique scale. I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think I'm going to be sure for a while now, but yeah. Great movie, and I hope Michael B. can do pretty good with the sequel. Sweet, trimmed it by 20%. See ya.